This will be good practice for like if I ever actually start like streaming regularly.
It's true.
Okay, so um, what I'm gonna do, I'm shooting for an hour long session, but if you guys want to take it any further, we can. What I'm gonna do is I got this little number here, little Pomodoro timer. We're gonna do 25 minutes, then we'll take a 5 minute break, and then we'll do another 25 minutes. Okay. So let's get that rolling. All right. So let me just to give you guys an idea of. Actually, I'm working on that project that I was talking about right now. Just to give you an idea of kind of where I'm at with Blender. Um, I have done a lot of character stuff with Blender. I basically what it is about 4 years ago. I a buddy of mine's like, hey, you want to try to make a game? And so I was like, yeah. And I had like no game art experience. And we started off with the idea of doing pixel art, but pretty quickly I kind of got into Blender, and so my idea was actually to do like a Dead Cells sort of thing, where we actually use 3D models to generate pixel art,
Oh,
and
cool.
and so I spent a good while doing that, and actually the project fell apart, because we were both like new people, trying to learn game dev, and game dev
Mm.
is hard, right, and time consuming.
Yeah.
But I did learn a ton. And if you guys want, I do actually still have the basic knowledge of how to go about doing uh, generating pixel art from Blender. So if you guys want to get to that at some point, we can work on that because it is pretty useful. Although
That sounds pretty cool. Yeah.
I do want to test out. There's a new program called Pixel Mash, which is built kind of to do that, where you can bring in like not only you can bring in images, you can bring in 3D models, and it'll actually generate the pixel art from there, and you can actually draw over the top of it. So you can use it as like a base for actual pixel art. So I may actually try to learn that, and then figure see if we can use that. But so I'm not restricted to just 3D. I'm all about just game art in general. I just love game art everything. So um, for a question, I have a question for you guys. Part of what I wanted to do this session is just learn a little bit about where you guys are with your Blender journey, so that I can kind of gauge what we need to learn. Um, I guess Lewis, tell me kind
Yeah.
of where you're at. Like, are you comfortable with like basic navigation and movement?
Uh, so no, I just downloaded and
You
installed
just
it.
downloaded it. Okay, so you're brand new
Yeah,
with it. What about you,
I'm on
Max?
this.
Yeah, that's basically where I'm at. I've had
Okay.
like a little experience like years ago, but not much else.
Okay. That's fine. That's fine. So I'm gonna open up a new scene. Okay, so let me check Discord here. Make
Also,
sure I can see.
just
Yeah, go
for
ahead.
reference, it's Louis, not Lewis.
Oh, Sorry, Louis. I
That's
think I've done
fine.
that. I think I may have
Everyone,
done that before too.
yeah,
Louis. Okay, like Louis. Okay.
yeah.
Max, let me see your screen too. This might. I might.
Got the default cube.
Okay, default cube. All right. So it looks like you obviously know how to use the middle mouse click.
Oh
uh,
yeah.
okay. So both you guys know at least shift middle mouse click to pan, middle mouse
I think you can
click
like
to orbit.
alt or
Uh, Sorry, go
uh,
ahead. And then control middle mouse click to zoom. You guys know that, right?
oh
Um,
yeah. Yeah.
okay. Do you know how to snap into an orthographic mode? Looks like I see one of you
Yeah,
guys doing that.
I just did that, but I don't know how I did it.
Okay, so
Oh,
first off, do you know what an orthographic mode is?
Yeah, it's like in Unity, right? Where orthographic is like for 2D, and then perspective is for
Yeah,
3D.
essentially, yeah. That's
right.
basically an orthographic mode is what Unity uses to. It's it's a camera mode where it basically pulls all the perspective out of the camera.
Hmm.
Um, are you guys on laptops or desktops right now? And if you're on a laptop, does your computer have a numpad?
Yeah, I have one.
Yeah, I have a numpad, but I'm on desktop.
Okay.
Yeah, desktop as
But
well.
yeah, it doesn't really matter as long as your computer. Blender doesn't have, unless we got into like hardcore rendering, which we're not going to because it's not necessary. Most laptops are going to run Blender fine. It's not like a super intensive program. That's one of the things I love about Blender, because it's super lightweight, easy to launch. Okay, so let's talk about orthographic mode because that's really important for most of the modeling things you're going to want to do. There are a couple different ways. Number one, the reason I ask on the numpad is the numpad is very, very important in Blender. If you're ever on a computer that doesn't have a numpad, there are ways to work around it, but I definitely suggest have a 3-button mouse, have a numpad. Which, by the way, are either of y'all using a trackpad or you both got mouses? Or Mises?
You got Mises.
You got Mises? Okay, good. So numpad. So the 5, I don't know if... one of the reasons that I'm showing my camera screen is that I do have my keyboard shortcut shown on that one. But if you'd rather watch the shared screen, that's fine too. So your numpad 5 is going to toggle between perspective mode and orthographic mode. Okay, so like you'll notice if we go into kind of this angle, turn on our orthographic, now it looks like we're playing like an isometric game.
Yeah.
Okay. You're also going to want to be able to switch between front, back, side, top. For that, I'm going to go ahead and let's get rid of all this crap. Let's go ahead and bring in a monkey head. Do you know how to add elements to a scene?
No.
Okay, so
I used to, but no.
by the way, this session we're going to focus just on our 3D view. We're not going to focus on all this crapola around here. Most of what we need to know is the 3D view anyway. So
JJ, for some reason, whenever I look at your camera view, it's a lot lower resolution.
Oh, really? Well, yeah, that's fine. Just switch over to the
but like it wasn't always like that. Like it changed at some point.
Oh, really?
Halfway.
Maybe it's probably because when I started recording, it's for whatever reason it's trying to save bandwidth or something.
All right.
So for that, I guess tell you what, I'm just gonna switch off the virtual cam, just in case, just because I want to make sure the recording itself is good. So just watch my my regular screen or my shared screen, okay? And if you have any questions about like a shortcut or how I did something, just let me know, okay? So adding objects to a scene. I think I see. Who am I looking at here? Somebody's doing.
I made a monkey.
You got a grease pencil monkey.
Yeah.
Adding objects to a screen. There's 2 ways. There's going to this menu up here at the top left. It's pretty straightforward, but I always suggest everything in Blender you want to get to where you're using keyboard shortcuts because that's how you get fast. That's how you get stuff done. So Shift A brings up your add menu. Okay, Shift and A, and then we're gonna go ahead and go to Mesh, and we're gonna grab a monkey. Okay, the reason I'm doing that is just because it's easier to see what front, back, side, top is. Okay, so by default it's gonna bring it into the scene with the monkey facing forward. So Blender, one thing to note, very important, especially for you guys coming from Unity. Blender is weird about its axes. Most programs, including Unity, Y is up. Including Maya's like that. I'm pretty sure 3ds Max is like that. For some reason, when they built Blender, they decided that the Z-axis was up. Okay, so what we're looking at here, we got this red line. That's our X. This Y line is our Y. It's going forward and back in space, and our Z would be up and down. Okay, so just to note that, and you can see in the top right hand corner that there's this little widget here that shows you that. That'll give, if you ever get confused about what direction you're looking, you can see Z up and down, the Y and the X right there. Okay.
Any sense?
I don't know why. Honestly, maybe it's because it was just like that when they first built it and they didn't want to change it or something. I have no clue. I don't know why they did that, but it's weird. But yeah, so everything in Blender, Z is up and down. Okay. So back to orthographic mode. So we have our numpad on the right. Okay. 1 on your numpad goes to front view. Okay. Yeah, check it out. And then we've got 3 is side view. 7 is top view. It's kind of just going around the numpad, basically. Pretty much everything on the numpad has to do with a view of some sort. So don't worry about those particulars, just play with it. But the corner keys are usually, we got front is the 1 key, 3 is the side, 7 is top, 9 is bottom. Generally, I'm pretty much always using front or side. Occasionally, I'll switch to top for something. Another way to do it, and by the way, you can go back out of orthographic just by going ahead and clicking and dragging with your middle mouse. Another way to do it is to go ahead and start rotating toward the direction that you want to snap to, and then press the Alt key, and that'll go ahead and snap you into whatever your orthographic mode you're closest to. Okay, so just practice that. That can be a little quicker than having to switch over to the numpad, but both of them are quicker than like using, say, like one of these widgets over here. Having said that, you can use the widget, like if you tap this little Z there, that's going to go ahead and pop you up to the top. Same thing with the Y or the X or whatever. Honestly, though, I never use that because A, it's confusing to figure out which one you're supposed to hit, and B, it's slower. I'm always about speed, and I don't really, if you're just somebody who likes widgets, though, it is there. Okay.
I appreciate you like telling us all the options, though. I think it helps.
Yeah, I find that most beginner level tutorials, they don't tend to do that. Having said that, let me know if I'm dumping too much on you guys. Okay.
No, this is good.
Because I can tend to do that sometimes, or if I get off track. If you need me to slow down, if you need me to take it easy, I will. Okay. All right, so there's basic navigation, okay? With that, you have 90% of what you need to know about actually navigating in Blender, okay? So just practice a little bit of that, get comfortable with it. You'll get to where this is kind of like that's one of the things I love about Blender. I feel like it's a lot easier to navigate than Maya and some other programs. Like, once you know the keyboard shortcuts and you know kind of the things you can do, it's like super fast and quick. So are y'all ready to start actually manipulating meshes?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, by the way, you'll notice I was in full screen there. You can do that by pressing Control and Spacebar on your keyboard, and it's going to go ahead and whatever panel you're hovering over at the current time, like with your mouse, everything in Blender from an interface perspective is context sensitive, so it goes based on whatever panel or section of the window you're over, which can sometimes be a little weird in the way it does it, but it's super useful. Okay, so Control and Space is going to go ahead and full screen whatever panel you're hovering over. That can be really nice, like if you've got a lot of, like, say you got a whole bunch of crap over here in your scene view and you need to like be able to full screen it to go through it. Makes it really useful. Same thing down here. Okay, so manipulating meshes. First thing we need to be able to do is move stuff around, right? So moving in Blender, they do have widgets. But you notice they're deactivated by default. Honestly, no one who really like is good with Blender and uses Blender uses the widgets. Maybe occasionally there's some dude who's pretty good that just likes them for some reason, but most of the time they just kind of get in the way, and you can do things way quicker by using your keyboard shortcuts. But I just want to go ahead and show you that they're there. So this viewport thing up here, this is how you can toggle on and off various aspects of what's going on in your 3D window. Okay, so by default the gizmos are off. I say leave them off. Maybe late, especially for our class, our lessons or whatever, our sessions. Leave them off. If you want to use them in your free time, though, if you just like widgets, go ahead. So the way I'm going to tell you to do it is to use your G key for grab. Okay, G for grab with your object selected, G, and what it's going to do is you're going to tap G, and it's going to toggle into grab mode. Okay, like so. All right, and then it's going to just stay there until you commit to it. You can commit to it by pressing left click, or you could also press just enter on the keyboard, and that's going to commit, undo. Also, too, you can cancel the movement by pressing just right click, okay? or escape. Okay, so and every movement in Blender works very similarly to that. Okay, does that all make sense? You guys good so far?
Yep.
Yep.
Now that's not a very precise movement though. Okay, so like from here, this is just viewport screen space. So you notice like it's kind of hard for me to say where it is like in space when I do it like that. It's just kind of moving it parallel to whatever camera view I'm in right now. So you're often going to want to constrain your movement. I see somebody I'm looking at here, I think is that Max, is already pressing the control tree.
Control?
Yeah, control. You're constraining. What it's doing, that's a snapping toggle. I'll get to that in a minute. What I want to show you right now, though, is just constraining on the X, Y, or the Z axis. Okay? So G, X. Again, keyboard shortcuts. So you're going to press G to go into grab mode. Then you're going to press X to constrain it. And that's going to constrain it on your X axis. Okay? Same thing with Y. G, Y. Okay? Like so. See how this could get really fast once you get used to it?
Yeah.
Or GZ. Okay? You can also say you want to do only two of those, two of the three. So again, let me know if I'm going too fast, okay? Say you want to be able to move just on this flat plane here, but you don't want to move it up and down. You can press G, and then we want to do everything except for the Z axis. So we're going to press Shift Z, and that's going to constrain it on both the X and the Y, but it's going to leave Z out. So now we're just moving on a parallel flat plane. Okay. Same thing if you wanted to, avoid one of the other ones. So Shift X. Now we can move it just up and down, forward and back, but not left and right. Okay. Same thing for the Y. Everybody good so far?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Now the snapping. We'll go ahead and since you already kind of started on it I'll go ahead and show you that because that's what we're learning in this section right here. I swear to God is like 90% of what you actually need to know to be able to accomplish some things in Blender. Blender's not as hard as it seems. It's kind of it's a Swiss Army knife. So it's got a whole ton of stuff in there that you can do, but think about how you use a Swiss Army knife. How many of the tools on a Swiss Army knife do you actually use? You know what I mean? You
Right.
like use your knife and then maybe occasionally you'll use the little spiral to do something, whatever. Blender is very much the same way. So people get intimidated by Blender because there's so much you can do with it and there's so much in it. But you don't need to do all that stuff. So snapping. So we'll talk a little bit kind of about these interface items. Essentially what I'm thinking is we're probably going to stick with the 3D window for this session, maybe even one more session because there's other tools and stuff we could do. But
With the grab, I just figured this out. I don't know if this was a thing you knew, but you can press and hold middle click to snap it to the axis instead of typing Z, Y, or X.
Oh yeah, you can do that. So it'll go ahead and snap it to whatever direction you're kind of already moving in. That's really useful too. So like if you you want to just go up, you can press the middle click. So yeah, that's very very good point. There's also, I never use it, but there is a way. If you've ever used Maya has like a quad view that you use a lot. Blender does have it too. I almost never use it, but that is Alt Control Q, and that's going to go ahead and snap you into a 4-view thing. So you have your top, your front, and your side, as well as your perspective. That could be useful in a lot of cases. If you're modeling something and you need multiple views to see what's going on, that could be super useful. But usually I just do a lot of switching back and forth between, so it's kind of up to you, but it's nice. And then just to press Control Alt Q to just go back. I don't remember. Let me see if the hover works. Yeah, the hovers isn't really context sensitive, so Alt Control Q is just going to switch you back to perspective mode, which is fine most of the time. Okay, so snapping. So we already saw that if you start G, you hold Control, it's automatically going to toggle on your snapping. And by default, you're in increment snapping, which what that is that's based on this grid here. So that's, if I bring up this little menu right here that at the top middle of your window, there's a little drop down, and you can change the snapping settings. You can also toggle your snapping on with this little magnet here. You turn that on, it's just automatically going to snap without you having to press the control key. I prefer to use the control key though, just keep the snapping off and then just only turn it on when I need it. So by pressing and holding control. And I actually find, what you'll find is, like, say if I go ahead and bring in a cube here, Shift A, grab a cube, and see it's over there in the middle of this window, and say I want to align this monkey head to the cube in some way. What we can do is, you see you have these vertex, edge, and face. There's also volume. I mainly use these top three, but there's a couple other ones here that we might test out at some point too. To be honest, I hardly ever use these two. Sometimes I'll use the volume for certain things, but the vertex, edge, and face are your most common ones. So it's like, if we snap on edge, I'm using this a ton with this architect project that I'm doing. We're building all these buildings. It really helps me like line stuff up. So like, say we want to align this monkey head with this box, so we can press GY to constrain it in the y-axis, like so. And then say I want to align it, say, with this back edge here, and I've got on edge snapping, I can press Control, hovering over that edge, and it's going to snap it to the same level as that edge. Does that make sense? Same thing if I wanted to snap it up here to this front edge, I can do that.
And the little orange circle appears?
Yeah, a little orange circle appears, and it's going to try to, it's basically going to line it up with that edge. Notice, like, if I go into this side orthographic, it is bumped up the back of this monkey head to line up with that edge that I hovered over. And then same thing if I move it back here, that snapped it to that back edge. Now you can see it's perfectly aligned with the back of that. It's super useful for a lot of things. Okay, so I don't want to get too bogged down in all these details right now. That's the main thing of snapping that you want to need to know. Also too, let's talk a little. As with anything, documentation is your friend. So if there's something that I don't cover here that you're curious about, just type in Blender documentation, go to the user manual, and you can see this is the 3.3 documentation. If y'all have both recently downloaded it, it's probably you're using 3.3. Honestly, anything above 2.8 though, it's all that really matters. You don't really need to know all that. By the way, we're coming up on 25 minutes, so I'm going to let this run, and then we'll take a 5-minute break. But any questions so far?
No, this is pretty clear.
Yeah.
Okay, y'all feel pretty good? Okay, so we've learned a little bit about moving stuff around. What we didn't talk about, though, I'm going to get rid of this, is actually, even before I get to scaling, we'll do scaling and rotating next, but even before I do that, I want to talk about the pivot point, because that's, we've moved our, chances are your monkey head's off in space somewhere. You also see this thing here in the middle. I don't know, it may be a little confusing, like what the heck is that? This is our 3D cursor, okay? It's kind of Blender's little, I don't know, it's like a little utility tool that you can move around and it does certain things. And then if you see on our monkey head here, we have this little orange dot right in the center. Do you guys see it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's our pivot point. We can move that around. Sorry. We can move that around, and I'll show you how. It's a little weird though. It's not like some other programs where you like press a button and you've got the like a little widget to move it around. I mean, I think there is actually functionality for that, but I'll show you kind of a faster, easier way to do it, and that's involving this 3D cursor. Okay, but before we get on to that, let's go ahead and take our 5-minute break. Okay, get something to drink, maybe walk around a bit, let what we just learned sink in, and we'll come back in 5 minutes. Okay.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Hey, I'm back.
Okay, coming back soon. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. All right, let me switch back over on my recording real quick. Recording. I hope this recording comes out. I'm probably gonna like mess it up and not be able to upload it, but it's okay. It's practice. Okay, so we were at pivot point. First off, do y'all confused about anything we covered? Anything you want me to repeat?
I think I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah, me too.
All right, so let's talk about pivot point. So pivot point, little large point right here. Pivot point's super important for any sort of manipulation in box modeling. You need to know where the pivot point is. You need to be able to move it around. Let's see here if I can remember. Okay, so I just mentioned I hardly ever actually move the pivot point itself, but I am going to show you guys. You can actually go to your options up here and change what your transform is doing. So when we grab it, we're grabbing the whole object, right? But we can actually go up here and tick on this origins here. Turn that on. You notice this little XYZ thing pops up. Now if we hit G, now we're actually moving the origin. Okay? And one thing I would say is that's a little bit too much work to be going up to options and ticking this on and off every time you want to move the origin point. So one thing we can do is if we go anything on the Blender interface, you can add to a quick menu. So I'm going to go up to my options here. I'm going to hover over this origins checkbox here. I'm going to right click. And you see that there's some options here. Number one, you see there's the online manual. There's Python reference. That's pretty much available for most things in the interface. So if there's ever something you want to know about, chances are you can go ahead and click this, and that's going to pull up the Blender documentation for it. Okay, just a quick tip on learning the program. But what I want to show you is if I right click again and go to add to quick favorites right here, click that. Now, if I'm just out here in my 3D view here, if I press Q, that's going to bring up my quick favorites menu. And now you can see right there that transform origins is on that menu. So we can toggle that on and off super quick just in our viewport. Okay? Everything in modeling is all speed, Well, how can I save time? How can I avoid having to go through menus and stuff? So now we can move our origin around. We can use that snapping that we just learned to snap to something. So if I want to snap this origin over to this edge, say if I want to snap it to his ear, I can hover over it, press Control, and it'll snap to, if we're on edge mode, it'll snap to that edge. You can also snap it to a vertex or a face, which, by the way, we haven't talked. I know y'all are both basically coming from 2D game stuff, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Um, do y'all understand what I mean when I say vertex, edge versus face?
Yes.
Okay, y'all are pretty familiar with all that. So uh,
Like the
face
vertex
and
would be like kind of like the point
yeah, yeah.
edges
So
line. Yeah.
a face in Blender is just a polygon. They call it a face, but it's just a polygon. Polygon's the universal term for it for everything. And then your vertex is the points that make up that polygon, right? And then your edge is the edges that make up that polygon. Okay,
What? Hmm.
you see. Which, by the way, to do what I just did, that's edit mode. You can use your menu up here to switch to edit mode if you want, but the easiest way is to hit tab. Okay, tab in and out. That's gonna switch you. That's gonna switch you between whatever mode you're currently in and edit mode, because edit mode's probably is the most common mode that you're gonna use. So generally, you're gonna be switching a lot back and forth. So the most common switching is between object mode, which is this overview mode where we can move objects around in our scene. And edit mode is the one that you go into to actually edit the mesh. They call this is called the mesh. Okay, so whenever you see all the points and stuff, in Maya it'd be called component mode. There's a bunch of, it's just it's exactly what it sounds like, editing mode. So anyway, we're talking about moving our origin around. Another common thing you're going to want to do is quickly snap the origin back to the center of your object. Because I moved it over this ear. Well, now I need it to go back. So how do I do that? We can press right click, hovering over our object with our object selected, set origin, and then you see we have some options here. Most common you're going to use is this origin to geometry. I click that. Now it's snapped the origin point right back to the center of your object. It's basically looking at the volume of the object, and it's going to snap it back. Which I noticed, let's see, who am I watching? I'm watching Max. You're still in edit mode. Are you just messing around, or are you having trouble getting that back out? Or
I think I'm good. I
you're
was just
good?
saying like how to move the what would that be, vertices?
Yeah. We'll get to that in just a few minutes.
Could
Lewis, you doing
you,
okay over there?
yeah, could you quickly go over the how you added this,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
effect on the
So,
origins thing?
uh, so this toggle here turns it on and off, right? To add that to, because main thing is you don't want to have to like go up to the menu every time. So if we hover over it, right click and press, yours will say add to quick favorites. That's going to add it. Okay. So now basically what that's done is that's added this menu option to a quick menu that you can bring up with the quick favorites. And you can do that with pretty much anything in the interface anywhere. So if there's something if there's a menu item or a tool or something that you find yourself switching back and forth to a lot, that can save you a lot of time by adding it to this menu. You can also, if you've got it on the menu and you feel like your menu is getting too cluttered, you can remove from quick favorites. Just right
How do
click
I access the quick favorites menu?
the Q key. Q
Oh,
key on your
okay.
keyboard. Okay,
Oh, gotcha.
got it. Max, you got all that?
Um, I just have one confusing thing. So you said you could snap vertices to like or snap the pivot point to like a
Uh huh.
vertice or something. So I have edge mode,
All right,
and
let
so
me.
if I have this on and I do, so I can take this. I don't
Um, you want
see it here.
what the problem is that you're looking to try and snap the pivot itself. It's actually going based on where your cursor is. So you need to hover your cursor over the edge that you want to snap it to, then press Control. See?
Oh, there we go. Okay,
Yeah,
cool,
that can
thanks.
be a little confusing. So it's based on where your cursor is, even though the pivot is somewhere off. Whenever you press Control, it's going to snap to wherever your cursor is located. Okay, that's the
Cool.
same with
All right.
pretty much anything. All right. Okay, let's see. So, where was I? So let's. I'm gonna go back out of this transform origins here. I'm gonna toggle this back off so that we're back into regular movement mode. Okay. We still good? So
Yeah,
you
you haven't
understand?
talked about what we use the pivot for yet, though, right? It's like for
Yeah, we're getting to that. So
okay.
um, I'll go ahead and so pivot it from what it sounds like. Let's go ahead and talk about rotate and scale because that'll be very important for rotating and scaling. So rotate, I bet you can imagine what the shortcut key is for rotate.
R.
Yep, there you go.
Wow.
Okay, so R is your rotate, and then the same constraints apply. So you can constrain it to rotate around the x-axis, you can constrain it to rotate around the z-axis, and you can constrain it to rotate around the y-axis. Okay, scaling, same exact thing. I bet you can guess what the shortcut key is for scaling. It's the S key, right?
Makes sense.
And then the same things apply. Right click to cancel, S, left click to apply. Okay, and it's going to stay where it is. So you can scale it up and down. Now, any operation like that we do is going to, by default, is going to move based on where the pivot point is. So I'm going to undo that and get it back to regular here. I'm going to switch into front orthographic view, which again we do by either using the Alt key, holding the Alt key while we're rotating, or pressing 1 on your numpad. Okay. Now, as of now, see where it's kind of scaling from? It's scaling from right in the center. But say for some reason, like say we want to scale it in the Z, right? We want to make it like super tall, but we don't want it. Here, that's a better. I'm gonna go ahead and get rid of my monkey for now. Probably better to use a cube for this one. So, so the cube, like say, first off, I'm gonna don't worry too much about this. I'm just gonna move it right here. Say I want to scale. Say this is our ground, right? And this is gonna be a column. And I want to go ahead and scale this up, but I only want to scale it upwards, right? So I want to scale it up so it builds it up like a column, right? Right now, if I'm scaling, it's just going to scale, even if I press the Z, it's going to scale in both directions. We don't want that, right? So we need, and its scaling is based on the pivot point. So I need to move this pivot point. So we can do kind of what I showed you, and we can move that scale, we can move it and snap it to this edge. But let me show you another thing with the pivot real quick is if I go into edit mode, okay, and we'll talk, this will be a good kind of I guess transition into actually talking about editing our meshes. So again, tab, if you're in object mode, if you're ever confused about what mode you're in, just check this top left hand corner toggle. You'll see right now we're in object mode. You also kind of pick up on the visual cues. Obviously, when we go into edit mode, you can start to see the vertexes and stuff. I'm going to go into edit mode, and I'm going to introduce you guys to... Actually, I don't even really have to move. We're going to use the 3D cursor to move our pivot point this time. So I want to talk a little bit about the 3D cursor. Let me know if I'm going too fast, okay? So we're in edit mode. I want to move this, the pivot point to where this 3D cursor is, okay? So we actually don't even have to move it now. It's already where I want it to be. I'm going to go back into object mode. I'm going to right click where we had this set origin. Remember, originally we set origin to geometry, but we also, you see there's an origin to 3D cursor. So if I hit that, it's going to snap the pivot to where that 3D cursor is. And we can move that 3D cursor around as well. And it may not be immediately clear why we would want to do that, but I'll try to show you here in a second. But now that we have the pivot moved, I'm going to turn that off. Now if I scale by pressing S on the Z axis. By the way, did y'all manage to move the pivot, both of you?
I think I did.
Let me just check. Let's see, Lewis, you got yours?
I accidentally
Oh, okay.
moved
You've moved your 3D
cursor. I don't know
cursor.
how to get it back to the origin.
So getting it back to the origin here, I'm going to go ahead and bring this up here just so it's on the recording. So press Shift S on your keyboard.
Yeah.
And you see it brings up those options. The bottom left one says cursor to world origin. Okay. That's going to snap it right back to the world origin. Now, right click on your box. Right click on the box.
Oh.
And then see in that menu set origin to 3D cursor. Okay, now it's going to Although you did need to change it back, but I just wanted to show you how to change the cursor. Just go ahead and undo that real quick. And I'll show you, watch my screen, I'll show you kind of how to fix what kind of where your box is right now.
Okay.
There's a couple different ways. So right now we have, say your box is off in space here, you want to get it back to where the 3D cursor is, right? Or actually you want to get it back to your origin, right? It doesn't really matter where the 3D cursor is right now. You want to zero out where your box is. You can basically zero out the location by pressing Alt-G. Alt-G, what that's going to do is, sorry, I'm throwing a lot of stuff at you guys. Alt-G clears out whatever transformations you've made on an object. Same thing with Alt-S or Alt-R. So if I've rotated my box off on a weird angle here and I want to get it back, I can press Alt-R. Okay. Same thing with scale. Alt-S, scale. Okay. That's going to be the same for any object until you can apply the transformations, and then it's not going to affect it anymore. And there are a lot of reasons to apply a transformation. Let's not worry about that right now, though. I'm just kind of trying to get you basic movement and stuff. So again,
it's Alt-G because G is
so
the grab. And
grab is transformations. Just to give you a little context, if you press in on your, let me look at y'all's screens real quick just to see. Hovering over your 3D view, let me check max. Press in on the keyboard, both of you. So that pops up your little right hand side menu. Okay. Lewis, you as well. That's showing you, that's a pretty important menu. You're going to check that one a lot. That's showing you all of your current transformations on whatever object you have selected in the scene. So, like if you look at mine, you see my rotations are all crazy. And you see in the rotation, it has all of my rotation degrees right here. Same thing for the Y, the G. So G basically matches up to your location. Okay, and then R obviously is your rotation, scale is your scale. Okay, notice we have dimensions which are kind of independent of those three. So like I can actually change the dimensions versus the scale. To be honest, I'm trying to think why. I can show you why that is later. Right now I'm not going to worry about it. Just know that I guess we can talk. I don't want to throw too much at you guys. When I say applying scale, because this is kind of an important thing to get to, and it's one of those things that trips people up a lot. It's like, I thought, I see it right now. It's like 2 feet long. Technically, what we've scaled so far is the object, not the mesh. Okay. So if I go over to this right hand view, or to this is our what is it, collection view? I forget what it's called. The outliner. Yeah, outliner. This is kind of an overview of our current scene, right? If you're ever confused about what's going on in your scene, generally you're going to check the outliner. You see how I have this cube is actually made of 2 different things? You see that?
Yeah.
So we have one orange and one green. Okay? The way I think of it is this orange one, this is our object. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go ahead and just change the name just so it's clear. I'm going to add an underscore OBJ. This is our mesh, this cube .002. I'm just going to change that, cube underscore mesh. Okay. This is a wrapper, while this is the actual mesh data. So when we go in here, this represents what we see in edit mode. Does that make sense? So we have, all our vertices, all of our faces and whatever. This is that data, whereas the object is just kind of like a wrapper around it. And whenever we do our scaling and rotating and stuff in object mode, we're actually only manipulating the wrapper. Like it's still technically changing the size of the mesh inside it, but like just to give you guys, don't get too bogged down in what I'm about to do. This is just for demonstration. This is a little bit more advanced, but we'll get there. I just want to show you something. If I snap this, if I add in, say, I'm going to add in a monkey, okay? And a monkey, if I go over here, it has its own object and mesh data, right?
Mhm.
We can actually change the mesh data independently of the object data. So if I just click on this and I have this little mesh menu here, I can actually change that to my cube mesh. And all of a sudden, look, it's a cube. Okay?
Oh.
But it looks differently than this cube, but it's using the same mesh data. So, and that is because this has transformations applied to its wrapper that this one doesn't have. This is still the default cube because we didn't actually edit any of this. We didn't move it around in here. Oh, and see,
Oh.
isn't that cool?
So you're,
So
you're
they're
saying if you
synced.
edit the mesh, it changes both of them?
Yeah, because it's using the same data. Like if you go over here to your
Yeah.
your outliner here, you see under Suzanne it says the cube mesh now. And
Yeah.
this is the exact same mesh that I'm using here. That's one neat way of instancing things. Like if you want to have like, say you wanted to have like a whole bunch of objects that are basically like you have like a whole bunch of candlesticks that you want to place around a scene, but you don't want to model like 10 candlesticks, right? You only want to model one. You can actually switch that. That's one way of instancing. There's other ways of instancing as well, but I just kind of wanted, I feel like that's kind of a important thing to point out for people. It took me a long time to figure that out. I kept running into weird issues with my meshes and I couldn't understand why. That's why. And when I talk about applying transformations, that's talking about this object. Like I said, this object is scaled, but the mesh inside it is not. When we apply it, when we get to that part, that's what we're doing is we're basically saying, okay, we want to apply this transformation to the mesh itself. So like if I think, let me just go ahead and spread. See, it won't let me do it right now because I have multiple objects using the same data. So I'm just going to get rid of this. And I'm going to press Control A to apply. Don't worry too much about this. I'm really, again, this is more demonstration. We'll go over this in detail later. But I can apply now. See, it zeroes out all those transformations.
Okay.
Okay. So now when we go in here, technically now, so if I did the same thing, if I add in another monkey and then switch to a cube mesh again, now notice it actually snaps it over there. Okay, that's because I've applied those transformations to the mesh itself.
Gotcha.
God, you said Control A for that?
Yeah, Control A, that's applying. Okay, and there's a whole bunch of, I pretty much almost never use all of these down here. It's pretty much always going to be these top ones here. Notice you can apply different parts of the data independently. You can actually apply scaling, rotation, and location separately if you want, or you can apply all of them. Okay, and sometimes that is useful. Does that all make sense to you guys? I was a little worried about going into that too soon, because
No,
it's a
no,
little bit.
it's
No,
I
yeah,
think
that's cool.
yeah, the demonstration was really helpful. I like learning a little bit about under the hood.
Well, yeah, that's the
stuff.
kind of, when I'm learning stuff, I like to know why we're doing something.
Right.
Besides just, here, follow me. You know what I mean?
And the explanation made perfect sense because it's like it has a direct parallel to Unity, where in Unity you have game objects,
Right.
and
right.
each game object can have like a component which is a mesh.
And that's the thing that you kind of learn, because I've done a little bit with Maya and I've messed around with the other programs. There are certain concepts like that that are universal, right?
Yeah.
It's just how you do it is different. Like what buttons you hit is different. But the more you kind of mess with that. So technically in learning this stuff, you're actually learning things that you'll be able to use in Unity as well.
Yeah.
Despite the weirdness of Blender using a Z-axis for up instead of Y. But okay, so let's see, where were we? So let's talk about the 3D cursor. I was kind of on my way to getting to talking about the 3D cursor. I think Louis, you were the one who already kind of figured out you can move the cursor around. Is that right?
Yeah, accidentally.
Yeah, accidentally. Oh, let's go ahead and cover that because you might end up accidentally moving it, and if you don't know how to fix it, it can be really frustrating. So let me just move this back over. If I can figure out how to frickin' work with Discord again. Oh, that's why. Okay, so the 3D cursor. So why would we want to use the 3D cursor? The 3D cursor it's kind of like a little utility tool for doing some of these operations. So I'm just gonna go ahead and get rid of this guy. By the way, do y'all want to take any time to like mess with what we just learned before we move on?
I think I'm good.
Good.
There's one thing I forgot was that like the cursor menu that lets you put it back to the middle.
Okay, that's
What's it called?
Shift S. Okay, and
Shift
that's
S.
gonna bring
Okay.
up. This is a pie menu. There's a whole bunch of different pie menus for different things. This is the one that I probably use the most often though. Notice, see, we have cursor to selected and selection to cursor. That ties into what I'm about to show you with the 3D cursor. Cursor to world origin is also very, very often going to use. Cursor to active, sometimes you can kind of mess with these other ones too. Pretty much all of these will come in handy at some points, but the ones I use the most often are the selection to cursor, cursor to selected, and cursor to world origin. And I'll show you what that means in a second. But world origin is just going to snap it right back to this center point in the world where the X and the Y converge. Okay. Shift and right click is going to move the cursor to wherever your mouse is hovering over. And that does actually apply if I do have an object in the scene. So if I had this cube, notice where the cube came in whenever I added it.
Right.
You see that?
Cursor.
So if I move my cursor over here, Shift A, add in a cone, notice where it comes in. So that's very important. So if you're trying to lay out a scene, it's always going to come in wherever your 3D cursor. Oh crap, we're already at another. Do you want to keep going after this? You want to take another break and then keep going, or are you about done for tonight?
I have to go at 9:30, so I could do one more.
Okay. Let's do another 5-minute break. Give my voice a rest, and then we'll do another 25 minutes. And which actually, who said that? Was that Louis or Max? Are
Yeah.
y'all both good to stay till 9:30?
Yeah, I'm good too.
Okay.
Cool.
All right. Let's take a 5-minute break, and we'll come back.
See you.
Okay. Y'all both in, ready to go?
Yes, sir.
Max, you there?
I'm here.
Okay, awesome. Give me a second. Let me switch back over on my recording. Okay. All right. So did I ever actually fully answer the why are we moving the pivot point question?
We kind of got sidetracked because you explained to me how to move
Yeah.
the 3D cursor.
Okay, so let's get kind of back to that. We'll go ahead and stick
You
with the
said, like,
3D.
you could scale from it and stuff.
Yeah, so we'll stick with the 3D cursor just for now because we're kind of circling back to the answer to that question. So we established you can move the 3D cursor around with shift and right click, right? And then when you bring in an object, it's going to come in wherever the cursor is. Now, the reason I brought up the cursor, let's go ahead and go back to our cube here. Let me look at where you guys are on your streams. Let's see here. Okay, y'all are both already in the center, but so watch my screen. I'm going to go ahead and go into edit mode on my cube, again, by having it selected, pressing tab. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to introduce you to another concept. All these concepts kind of feed into each other, so I'm trying not to weave too far out of the way, but I promise we're always kind of circling back. The next thing we're going to need to know is how to switch between selection modes. Okay, in selection mode, by that I mean something a little different than actually this editing mode here. What I'm talking about is these three cursors here at the top left hand corner of your screen. You see them? You got this 1, 2, 3. That is vertex, edge, and face mode. Okay, and we talked about that a little while ago. We know what vertex versus edge versus face is. What that's doing is switching the primary object that we're selecting. Okay, you can also the quicker way to switch is using 1, 2, and 3 on the top of your keyboard. This is different than separate from the numpad. Okay, numpad numbers are your views, right? But 1, 2, and 3 on the top of your keyboard in edit mode is going to switch back and forth between these three different modes. And you might can guess that if we're in face mode, then it's going to select a face to edit. Okay, same thing with the vertice. If we're in vertex mode, by pressing 1, that's going to select vertices. Notice that the display changes a little bit. If we switch to edge mode, we're no longer selecting faces or vertices. We're selecting just edges. Okay? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I'm actually going to switch to face mode. And I'm going to go... I want my cursor at the bottom of this box. So I'm actually going to select this bottom face. Okay? I'm going to press Shift S. That same Shift S that we used in object mode applies here. And we can actually go cursor to selected. That's going to snap that 3D cursor to whatever we have selected. The same would apply if I had a vertex selected. It's going to snap it to that vertex. Snap it to an edge. It's going to snap right to the center of that edge. Okay?
Oh.
And now we have fine-grained control over where the 3D cursor is, and we can use it for various different things, but for what I'm going to demonstrate right now, that's changing our origin. So now it's right in the center of that bottom face. If I go back into object mode, which actually go back into object mode by pressing tab. Now I right click again and go to set origin to 3D cursor. Now my cursor is right on the smack dab in the center of that bottom plane. And now I can use that. Do you guys remember how to cancel the transformation on an object? How to zero it out?
Alt
G.
Alt G, right? Now we have our box flat on the ground, right in the center of our world. Now if I go into front and I want to scale it, I go S, and then I just want to scale it up like a column, Z, and notice where it scales from.
Right.
Scales from the
pivot
bottom,
point.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing applies for all transformations, right? Now, like if I'm rotating, it's rotating from that point. That's why it's called the pivot point. Okay? So you're going to be doing a lot of moving your pivot around for various operations to make things act the way you want them to act. Okay? Make sense?
Yeah.
Snapping works with that as well. So like if I go to vertex mode here and switch to vertex in my snapping, move this, go into G to move, and then I hover over the tip of this cone, snap. Now it's going to snap to that, although I think I need to change, I believe, well, I thought it was going to snap directly based on the pivot there, but I guess I'm wrong on that. But you notice there are ways we can figure it out. It's no big deal. But, oh, you know what it is? I'm just going to do something real quick. Go into vertex mode. Let's see. Sorry, this is a little bit of a tangent, but I'm just trying to figure out how I would go about that. Okay, well, we'll come back to that. But you can start to see how this would be useful. Okay. So we've covered moving objects. We've covered snapping. We've covered the 3D cursor. Do y'all kind of understand the 3D cursor now? You understand kind of where it might be useful?
Yes.
Oh, also, let's talk a little bit about these other options up here. Actually, well, no, before we get into that, let's talk a little bit more about the editing mode. So now we want to actually talk about modeling. So let's go ahead and just, I'm exiting. You guys can stay where you are. I think you both have cubes in your scenes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of wrecked mine, but yeah.
Yeah, just go ahead and we didn't talk about how to delete stuff yet, did we? So I'm gonna undo that. So number one, the selection options. I think both of y'all are in box select already. If I'm let me look here. Yeah, box select. So you both basically can select your objects, right? Delete in Blender is the X key. Okay, just you can kind of imagine why that is. So select everything, press X, and then you might as well just for practice or whatever. And then you know how to add an object back in, right? Shift A. I'm just going to go ahead and grab a cube. Notice it came in where my 3D cursor is. So I need to actually go ahead and cancel that transformation out, get it back to the center. I'm also going to go ahead and snap my cursor back to world origin. Oops. Okay. All right. So let's talk about actually editing something. Y'all ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So edit mode, right? Edit mode's where we're doing the vast majority of our actual box modeling. Okay. And again, remember we're editing the mesh here, not the object. So we talked about how to actually move your the selection modes, right? So 1 is vertex, 2 is edge, 3 is face. The same constraints apply as the same basic manipulation applies as in object mode. So GZ will actually constrain on the Z-axis, right? So if I was to grab just this one vertice and I wanted to constrain it on, say, the Y-axis, okay, you'll be using that a lot. Same thing with snapping. So let's see, what's a good? Let's say I want to snap this vertice to the other vertice here. So G and then Y to constrain on the Y, and then I can snap it over to that one. All right.
Ooh.
Now, bear in mind, I didn't actually connect those two yet, though. They're still disconnected from each other. And that's something you're going to have to get cognizant of, because that can create problems if you're unaware of that kind of thing. You know what I mean? If you're unaware of what's going on with your vertices. They're not actually connected right now. They're just put in the same spot. Okay. I'm going to just undo that. Let's talk about... first off, are y'all comfortable with that? You kind of understand where I'm going with that?
Yes.
You can do the same thing with your edges. You can say you want to snap it to the same level as this vertice. You can snap there. Same thing with this is very useful for manipulating the faces. Like if you want to like line it up. This is where if we go into orthographic mode, you notice your grid starts to show up. This is where you're going to be using your orthographic modes a lot. is like if you want to kind of keep things measured and in line. Now if I press GY, I can move this face along that y-axis and press Control to snap to this grid. Okay? That's how you can start to get fine-tuned control over how much, how much distance or whatever you're moving something by. You can also, with that face selected, you can also edit the transform values right here. So if I wanted to actually type this in, you see what I'm doing? I typed in 4 meters on the Y.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Or if I wanted to go back, I could type in 2, and that's going to move it back to 2 meters. That's basically 2 meters from where it, from the whatever axis, wherever the center axis is, I think. Same thing with the Z, if I wanted to move it up or down. Another thing which actually I didn't cover yet, now that we're talking about measurements, and this would apply in object mode as well. You don't actually necessarily have to go to that menu to do it. Say I wanted to move this over 1 meter on the Y. I press GY, right, to constrain it. But you can type in 1, and that's automatically going to go 1 meter or one Blender unit. By default, Blender uses meters. So whenever you see one of these boxes on your grid, that's representative of a square meter. Just like Unity, it matches up exactly with Unity. Okay, so did y'all understand what I said about typing in the distance?
Yeah, when moving
Yes.
it, right?
So
Grabbing it.
so if you press G, Y, or G anywhere, same thing with scaling or rotating, you can actually type in an amount and it'll do it. When you're doing scale, that actually is not meters, that's a percentage basically. So if I go back into object mode, we look at scale. When that scale changes, say I wanted to, just to make it a little easier to see, I'm going to get rid of this box and just bring in a new one.
So when we are typing, it shows up on the top left. Is that it?
It'll show up in this in your transform in the top right, I guess. But actually, doesn't show? Oh yeah, it does show up on the top left. I'm sorry, I just never look at that. Yeah, if you are curious about what's going on with your movement, you can see it up in the top left-hand corner of your window. But so I talked about the grid. So you see how this grid has these boxes on it? Those are Blender units, right? And by default, that's 1 meter. So by default, this box is 2 meters by 2 meters, as you can see. Now, if we wanted to scale this down by exactly half, we could type S.5, right? And now it's a 1 meter by 1 meter box. We scaled it in half. Does that make sense? Or if I wanted to scale 1.5, and that scale that's going based on where it's at right now. So
it's like a multiplier,
I guess. Yeah, it's kind of weird, so just be aware of that. Or if you go back over to your thing here, we wanted to get it back to the regular size, we could just type in 1 and 1. Or actually what you can do is, I think, Alt, select all of them, type in, and hold Alt, drag over all of them, and that'll highlight them all, and you can change them all at the same time. Okay, so we're starting to get in a little bit into nitty-gritty stuff. Again, let me know if it's getting to be too much. Okay, does that all make
oh
Go
yeah
ahead.
Just like, are you planning to keep going for a while for this?
No, we're
Okay.
probably gonna.
I feel
sorry,
like it would be helpful at some point, maybe not now, like the beginning of the next one or something, to like do a kind of like you would like either a homework assignment or like
sure.
on the spot here, you like ask us like different tasks, like create a box and move it to here,
Yeah,
just
sure.
so like you can test us.
Yeah,
Make
definitely.
sure we're following along.
Yeah, that's kind of the plan. I want to get you guys through the basics, and then kind of start building some stuff together. As a matter of fact, I will go ahead and give you one homework assignment before we go, because we're about ready for you guys to go anyway. So let's pull this up. I'm gonna go to Google here, and I want you to do this too. I want you guys to look for a character turnaround. Probably try to shoot for maybe like a cartoon character, something simple, or a simple character turnaround. Images on Google. Find something you like. Try and find something super simple though. Nothing. Don't get like a crazy character. Okay. Unless you just want to challenge yourself and you feel like maybe you can handle it. I mean, if there's anything you can't figure out, I'm sure I can walk you through it. So find a character turnaround, preferably one that's pretty close to orthographic view, like this. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to model something with that. Does that sound like a good project?
Yeah, that's cool.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll do simple too.
So, or if you got one that you want, or if you happen to like to draw, you can draw one for yourself. But yeah, find a character you want to do, and we're going to use that as a project. Preferably, like I said, something simple that we can do is like a low poly character. Don't get like a AAA game character, you know what I mean? With like a bunch of hair and stuff and like crazy cool clothing. We're not going that far. We're going to shoot for super low poly, super simple, something like this guy. Where, maybe even a character like this might be okay. That'd be there's a little more going on here, but this is still pretty simple, right? Even this, a little more anime-ish, but there's not a ton going on here. Maybe, some of this stuff is more sculptorally. Like maybe try to...
image in the meeting chat. Is that a good one? It's like an owl.
Let's see here. That would be fine. That's fine.
I found this chicken that I like.
Okay. Yeah. So, if you just want something to do during the week, before we get to the next meeting, you can try to take what we've learned and just see how far you can get. We'll do it a little separately whenever we get together. But yeah, if you want to play around with that, you can go ahead and do it. But that's kind of what I'm envisioning for the next at least few weeks, kind of go through and that'll give us a few chances to mess with some things. If you can get, maybe try to do a character and like a prop or something more hard surface. Simple game.
Can I make a hat?
Yeah,
for
like
my owl.
Yeah. Something that would have some hard edges and stuff too, like a gun or like a, something just so we're not doing all organic stuff. Mm-hmm. But yeah, try and find some reference to work with. Okay. Oh, and also too, PureRef. Have you ever heard? Do you guys know? Are you familiar with PureRef?
No, I'm not.
It's a super awesome program. It's free for visual reference.
Oh, the link was purple for me, so I must have clicked on it at one
It's
point.
not. This isn't 100% required. As a matter of fact, we're going to be loading our reference into Blender. But I just wanted to point this out because this is really good for, like, if you want some supplementary reference to pull over to our screen, like say you need, multiple images, multiple views or whatever, beyond just like having an orthographic view to work with. This can be really useful. Like I'll load, let's see, let me load this. This may take a second to load. Like this is one I'm using. This is a reference board I'm using for the current house I'm modeling. See, I've got my plans and stuff. See how it hovers over the screen, and I turned it off. Here, let me turned Control Shift A. I can kind of leave it hovered over my screen and reference it. So I would definitely suggest going ahead and downloading this. That way you can kind of have multiple images available to you that you can kind of move around. It's a really good tool for any sort of creative endeavor, really, that you need to, the key is always like having a bunch of reference that you can refer to. Yeah. So anyway,
One thing that I thought of when you showed us the different orthographic views, like with the 1 and 3 and the 7 and 9, I remember like one of my brothers, I think, using those views and then like having like a sketch behind it,
Yeah.
and then like modeling off of that.
Yeah, and I'm
sketch.
gonna show you guys. That's kind of why I wanted you to go ahead and get the images, because I'm gonna show you guys how to do that. That's kind of how I started with it. Now when I'm doing characters, I do them a little differently. I actually sculpt them. But using an orthographic view is really useful, especially if you're modeling. So what we're going to do is we're going to load an image in and kind of set it in the background, and then we're going to use that to actually build our models out, and that'll give you a really good kind of overview of all the tools and all the techniques you're going to need to be able to do something useful in Blender. Okay. So let's call it a night. Let's call it a night there. Do y'all have any other questions before we go?
I just have one question. How do you add a vertice?
How do you add a vertice? Yeah, that's
Just-
okay. So usually you're not adding vertices. Usually you're going to be working with a primitive and then like messing with it. But there are a couple of different ways. So we'll just cover this real quick. So like
I do have to go. So...
Yeah, you can go and go. We're technically the
Alright.
lesson is done. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna go ahead and end the recording right here. We'll cover some more of this mesh stuff next week. But I'll if you wanna, I think Max, was that you that asked that?
Yeah.
You can stick around and we'll cover a few more things if you want. Okay?
Thanks for the lesson, though. I really appreciate it. It's super
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, no
All
problem.
right. Talk
Let
to
me
you
know
next
if you
week.
guys have
Bye.
any other questions on the way. Okay.
Yeah.
See ya.
See ya.